The meeting was supposed to be my moment. 3 months of work, 12 campaign concepts, endless late nights. Then my assistant, Jessica, stood up and presented my entire strategy as her own. "Too bad none of your ideas made the plan," she said, smirking. The CEO, Brandon, laughed. Maybe she's keeping secrets. The room went silent. Everyone stared. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite my racing heart. "Just one," I said, and slid a single document across the polished table to our corporate lawyer, Thomas. 6 months earlier, I never would have believed this was possible. I was Wendy Harper, marketing director at Cascade Tech Advertising in Seattle, and I loved my job. 8 years I had given this company. 8 years of innovative campaigns, client relationships, late nights making magic happen. My divorce had been finalized a year before, and honestly, work had become my refuge. I poured everything into it. When the position for a marketing assistant opened up, I interviewed 12 candidates. Jessica stood out immediately. Fresh from business school, sharp answers, eager to learn. She had this energy that reminded me of myself a decade earlier. I hired her on the spot. The first month was wonderful. Jessica absorbed everything like a sponge. She asked to sit in on client calls to learn the process. She requested access to my project files for organizational purposes. She volunteered to help with presentations, staying late to perfect slide decks. I thought I had found the perfect assistant, someone I could mentor. The first warning sign came 2 months into her employment. I had casually mentioned a campaign concept to Jessica over coffee. Something about using augmented reality for our retail clients' holiday promotion. Just thinking out loud, really. The following week, I walked into a strategy meeting and heard Derek, one of our junior executives, pitching almost the exact same idea. When Brandon asked where it came from, Derek smiled and said Jessica had brought the concept to him. I felt a strange twist in my stomach, but I brushed it off. Maybe Jessica had mentioned my idea without realizing it was mine. Maybe Derek had coincidentally thought of something similar. The marketing world is small. Ideas overlap. I didn't want to be that person, the paranoid director who saw theft in every coincidence. So, I said nothing. But Jessica started staying later and later. She would volunteer to organize my desk, to file my notes, to back up my computer files. I appreciated the help. I was drowning in work, preparing for our biggest pitch of the year. Our major client, a national retail chain called Summit Stores, was up for a complete rebranding. This was a $12 million account. The quarterly meeting in 3 months would determine if we kept them. I spent every spare moment developing the strategy. Consumer research, focus groups, design concepts, media planning. It was comprehensive, innovative, perfect. I shared pieces with Jessica as I went, asking her to proofread presentations, to check my data, to format my documents. She was my assistant. That was her job. I trusted her. 3 weeks before the quarterly meeting, Jessica called in sick. She didn't answer my texts or emails. I felt annoyed but not worried. People get sick. But when she didn't respond for 2 days, I started to panic. We had deadlines. I needed those files she had been organizing. The morning of the quarterly meeting arrived. I walked into the office early, my presentation loaded on my laptop, ready to finally share 3 months of work. And there in the lobby stood Jessica, laughing with Brandon, our CEO. They were looking at a tablet together, heads close, smiling like old friends. My chest tightened. Something felt wrong. The conference room filled up. Board members, senior executives, Thomas, our corporate lawyer, Patricia from HR. Brandon called the meeting to order. He smiled broadly and said, "Before we get to old business, I want to share something exciting. Jessica has been working on a comprehensive rebranding strategy for Summit stores, and I think you're all going to be impressed." The room blurred. I gripped the edge of the table. Jessica stood up, connected her laptop to the projector, and began presenting my strategy. My consumer research, my design concepts, my media plan, every single piece, with tiny modifications to make it look slightly different. But it was mine. 3 months of my life on that screen, and she was taking credit for all of it. I tried to interrupt. "Brandon, this is my work. I developed this strategy." Jessica didn't even pause. She clicked to the next slide. Brandon held up his hand. "Wendy, please, let's hear the full presentation." My face burned. Around the table, people avoided my eyes. Jessica continued, smooth and confident, fielding questions, explaining details she had only learned from me. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Brandon beamed. "Exceptional work, Jessica. This is exactly the kind of initiative we need." I stood up, my voice shaking. "This is my strategy." I shared it with Jessica to proofread. "She's stolen my work." Jessica turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something cold behind her professional smile. She pulled out a folder from her bag. "I understand you're upset, Wendy, but I have documentation of my work." She spread papers across the table. Emails with timestamps showing her ideas, documents with her name, notes in her handwriting. "I've been developing this for months." I stared at the papers. The emails looked real. The timestamps predated my files. But I absolutely knew, that this was impossible. "Those are forged," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to myself. Brandon's expression hardened. "Wendy, this is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "I have my original files. The timestamps, the metadata." Jessica tilted her head, concerned. "Wendy, I think you're confused. Maybe you saw my early drafts and they inspired some of your ideas. That happens sometimes. I'm not upset about it." The kindness in her voice was worse than any insult. Several people around the table nodded sympathetically. At Jessica, not at me. "Too bad none of your ideas made the plan," Jessica said softly, almost sad. Brandon laughed, trying to lighten the tension. "Maybe she's keeping secrets from us." The room went silent. Everyone stared at me. The pity in their eyes was unbearable. That's when I stood up slowly. My hands were steady despite my racing heart. Because 2 months ago, after that incident with Derek, I had started keeping my own documentation. Not because I fully suspected Jessica yet, but because something felt off. I had screenshots with metadata, recordings of our conversations. Washington is a one-party consent state. I had been protecting myself. "Just one," I said, and slid a single document across the polished table to Thomas. Thomas picked up the document, and I watched his face change as he read. The notary seal was visible from across the table. I had taken this to a notary public 6 weeks ago, when my suspicions had grown too strong to ignore. "This is a log," I said calmly, though my heart was hammering. Time-stamped and notarized. It contains screenshots of my original files with full metadata showing creation and modification dates. It includes recordings of conversations where I discussed these concepts with Jessica weeks before her supposed drafts. It has my handwritten notes with dates that predate everything she just showed you. Jessica's face went pale, but only for a second. Then she recovered, her expression shifting to confusion. "Wendy, I don't understand why you would fabricate evidence against me." "I didn't fabricate anything," I said. "The notary seal proves the date this documentation was created." "Thomas, you can verify it." Thomas was still reading, his lawyer's face carefully neutral. He looked at Jessica, then at Brandon. This is detailed. I need to review it thoroughly, but if authentic, it does suggest the timeline of development favored Wendy's claims. Brandon leaned forward, his earlier smile gone. Jessica, can you explain this? For a moment, Jessica looked genuinely caught. Her mouth opened, then closed. I felt a surge of vindication. Finally, someone would see the truth. Then Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I can explain, she said, her voice breaking. She reached into her bag and pulled out another folder, this one thick with papers. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this. Wendy, I really wanted to protect you. My stomach dropped. For the past 4 months, Jessica said, tears now streaming down her face. Wendy has been harassing me, creating a hostile work environment. I documented everything because I was scared, but I didn't want to ruin her career. She spread papers across the table. Text messages, printed emails, statements from other employees. She screamed at me in front of clients, threatened my job if I didn't work 16-hour days, made me cry in the bathroom more times than I can count. I think the stress made her paranoid. That's why she's making these accusations. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. That's not true. None of that is true. Jessica looked at me with such sadness. Wendy, please. I have witnesses. Derek saw you yell at me. So did Amanda and Troy. She gestured to 3 people around the table, all of whom nodded slowly. Derek spoke up. I hate to say it, but Jessica did come to me crying several times. Wendy was very demanding with her. Amanda, a junior designer, added quietly. I heard shouting from Wendy's office one day. It was uncomfortable. I spun to face them. I never shouted. Jessica, tell them the truth. But as I looked around the room, I saw the shift. People who had known me for 8 years were looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was dangerous. Brandon stood up. This is clearly a complex situation that requires a full investigation. Thomas, we need HR involved immediately. Patricia, can you coordinate with an external investigator? Patricia, our HR director, nodded. She had only started 3 months ago, brought in by Brandon to modernize our human resources department. Absolutely. I recommend we suspend both Wendy and Jessica, with full pay, pending a thorough review. Both of us? I said. She stole my work. She's lying about harassment. Thomas finally spoke, his voice careful. As corporate counsel, I must remain neutral. Both sets of evidence will be turned over to the investigator. We'll get to the truth. Ho! Jessica wiped her tears. I just want this to be over. I've been so scared to come to work. As people filed out of the conference room, Jessica walked past me. She leaned in, her voice a whisper only I could hear. You should have just let me have it. Now you'll lose everything. Then she was gone, leaving me standing alone in the empty conference room. The suspension was immediate. I had to pack my personal items while security watched, as if I were a criminal. The walk to my car felt endless. Every person I passed avoided my eyes. At home, I sat in my apartment and stared at the walls. My phone buzzed with texts from colleagues. Some were supportive, but cautious. Most were silent. In the corporate world, people don't associate with controversy. I called my lawyer that evening. His retainer alone cost me $5,000. He listened to my story, reviewed my documentation, and said, "This is winnable, but it's going to be expensive and ugly." I didn't know yet just how ugly it would get. The investigation began 2 weeks later. Patricia brought in an external firm, supposedly neutral. The lead investigator was Patricia herself. She interviewed everyone involved, reviewed all documentation, and promised a fair assessment. I should have known something was wrong when I casually mentioned Patricia's name to a friend who worked in HR at another Seattle tech company. Patricia Chen? My friend said. I think she went to University of Washington. Let me check. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A screenshot of Patricia's Facebook profile. And there, in her friend list, was Jessica. Not just friends, sorority sisters. Delta Gamma, University of Washington, class of 2015. My hands shook as I immediately emailed Thomas and Brandon. There's a conflict of interest. Patricia and Jessica were in the same sorority. They're friends. She can't lead this investigation. Brandon's response came an hour later. Brief and dismissive. Patricia is a consummate professional. Your concern is noted, but we have confidence in her integrity. I called my lawyer. He said we could push harder, but without proof of actual bias, it would just make me look more paranoid. The interviews started. Patricia met with Derek first. According to the grapevine, his testimony was damning. He claimed I was erratic, demanding, verbally abusive, said he was afraid of me, that I had mood swings and unrealistic expectations. Amanda and Troy gave similar statements. Incidents that never happened, blown out of proportion. The time I asked Amanda to revise a design became a story about me making her redo it 12 times while calling her incompetent. The time I reminded Troy about a deadline became me threatening his job. 3 colleagues tried to defend me. Marcus from accounts, Samantha from creative, and Joel from media planning. They told Patricia I was always professional, supportive, a good manager. Jessica had an answer for that too. She told Patricia that I had promised these 3 people promotions if they supported me. She hinted at inappropriate relationships, whispered implications that Marcus and I were more than colleagues. All lies, but the seeds of doubt were planted. Then the evidence started changing. My time-stamped files, the ones I had so carefully documented, were pulled from the company server by IT. When Patricia reviewed them, somehow the metadata had been altered. Dates changed, properties modified. How is this possible? I demanded in my interview with Patricia. Those files were notarized. The dates were verified. Patricia looked at me with cool professionalism. Wendy, with the right software, metadata can be changed. The fact that you went to such lengths to notarize altered files actually suggests you were planning to make false claims. I didn't alter anything. Someone else must have accessed the server. Our IT department shows no unauthorized access to your files. Then check Jessica's access. She had my passwords. Jessica's access logs show nothing unusual. Wendy, I understand you're under stress, but these accusations are becoming increasingly far-fetched. My recordings were similarly dismissed. These conversations could have been edited, Patricia said. And frankly, recording an employee without their knowledge raises ethical questions about your management style. Washington is a one-party consent state. It's completely legal. Legal doesn't mean ethical. I felt the walls closing in. Every piece of evidence I had was being twisted, reinterpreted, made to look like proof of my guilt rather than my innocence. Then the story leaked. A local business blog ran an article. Seattle tech firm investigates director for workplace harassment. They didn't name me directly, but the details were specific enough. Marketing director. 8 years at the company. Accused by assistant of creating hostile environment. In Seattle's tight tech community, people figured it out within hours. My phone exploded with messages. My mother called, panicked, asking if the article was about me. My friends from college reached out, some supportive, others clearly fishing for gossip. My ex-husband sent a text. Wow. Guess I dodged a bullet. I wanted to scream. Professional contacts started distancing themselves. LinkedIn connections withdrew. An industry conference I was scheduled to speak at quietly removed me from the program. Meanwhile, through mutual friends, I learned Jessica was still going to the office. Not officially working, but voluntarily helping during the transition. She had been seen having lunch with Brandon multiple times. They were getting close. My savings were draining. The lawyer's bills kept coming. I had maybe $15,000 left after the retainer and initial work. My rent was $2,000 a month. I was burning through money with no income beyond the suspension pay, which would end when the investigation concluded. 6 weeks into the investigation, Patricia delivered her findings. I sat in a conference room with Thomas, Brandon, and Patricia. The report was 200 pages long. Patricia summarized: overwhelming evidence of hostile work environment created by Wendy Harper. Multiple witnesses. Pattern of behavior. Recommendations. Termination for cause. Jessica was completely cleared. Thomas looked uncomfortable as he reviewed the report. Patricia, some of this evidence seems contradictory. The timeline is unclear in several places. I stand by my findings, Patricia said firmly. Brandon nodded. Thomas, what's our legal exposure if we proceed with termination? If we follow Patricia's recommendations, we're on solid ground. The documentation supports the decision. I found my voice. This is wrong. You're making a mistake. Brandon looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt. Then it was gone. Wendy, we'll schedule a formal termination meeting for next Monday. I'm sorry it came to this. I walked out of that office knowing I had 1 week left before my career was destroyed. Monday morning arrived too quickly. I dressed in my best suit, determined to maintain some dignity. The termination meeting was scheduled for 9 in the morning. Brandon, Thomas, and Patricia sat across from me in the conference room. The same room where this nightmare had started. Brandon spoke first, his tone formal. Wendy, we've completed our investigation into the workplace harassment allegations. Based on the findings, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. For cause? I asked, my voice steady. Yes. We take workplace harassment very seriously. Your behavior violated multiple company policies. I looked at Thomas. You know this is wrong. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Brandon slid a packet across the table. This is a severance agreement. 2 months' salary in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and non-disparagement clause. You'll also waive your right to sue the company. I read through it. The language was clear. Take the money. Stay silent. Go away. What if I don't sign? Then you receive only the legally mandated 2-week severance. And no letter of recommendation. I thought about my dwindling savings, the legal bills, the impossibility of finding work with this cloud over my head. 2 months' salary would buy me time, but it would also mean accepting this injustice, letting Jessica win completely. I won't sign, I said. I won't be silenced about what happened here. Brandon's expression hardened. Then we're done. Security will escort you out. You have until end of business today to remove your personal belongings. As I stood to leave, Patricia spoke for the first time. Wendy, I hope you get the help you need. The condescension in her voice made my blood boil, but I walked out without responding. That afternoon, while I was boxing up my desk under security's watchful eye, a company-wide email went out. I saw it on my phone before they cut off my access. We're pleased to announce Jessica Hartley's promotion to marketing director. Jessica has shown exceptional initiative and leadership. She'll be taking over the marketing department immediately. Please join us in congratulating her. Jessica's message followed. I'm honored and humbled by this opportunity. I know the past few months have been challenging for our team. I want to create a work environment based on mutual respect and collaboration, where everyone feels safe and valued. Together, we'll overcome adversity and move forward. The words overcome adversity felt like a slap. She was positioning herself as the victim who rose above, while I was cast as the villain. I drove home in a daze. My apartment felt suffocating. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the conference room scene, searching for the moment where I could have done something different. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues texting. Some were genuinely sympathetic. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say." Others were more cautious. "Hope you're okay. Let's catch up sometime." Which really meant I can't be associated with you publicly, but I'll throw you a bone of pity. A few people sent the more honest message. Silence. I spent the next week applying for jobs. Marketing director positions at agencies across Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. My resume was strong. 8 years of experience. Successful campaigns. Measurable results. The first interview seemed promising until the interviewer's demeanor suddenly changed halfway through. "I have to ask," she said carefully. "There have been some concerns raised about your departure from Cascade Tech." "There was a workplace dispute," I said. "I'm happy to discuss the details. I think we've heard enough. We'll be in touch." They never called back. The second company ghosted me entirely. Set up an initial phone screen. Seemed excited. Then nothing. I followed up 3 times. No response. I checked my LinkedIn profile. Views were up dramatically. People were looking, but not because they wanted to hire me. They were curious about the scandal. I was unemployable. My savings account dropped below $20,000. Rent, utilities, groceries, phone bill, insurance. I canceled my gym membership, cut my streaming services, stopped buying anything that wasn't essential. I filed for unemployment. The weekly benefit was $320. It barely covered food. Then, one evening, there was a knock on my door. A process server handed me an envelope. "Wendy Harper, you've been served." I opened it, standing in my doorway. Jessica was suing me. Personally, the lawsuit claimed defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and injury to reputation. She alleged that my false accusations had damaged her emotionally and professionally. She was seeking $500,000 in damages. $500,000. I couldn't breathe. I called my lawyer immediately. "How is this possible?" I asked. "She won. She got my job. What damages could she possibly claim?" My lawyer's voice was grim. "She's claiming that your accusations, even though ultimately disproven, caused her emotional trauma, anxiety, depression, damage to her reputation within the company. It's a stretch, but it's a legitimate cause of action. How much will it cost to defend this?" "Minimum? $50,000. Could be more if it goes to trial." I had maybe $30,000 left. Another 15 in my 401k that I couldn't touch without massive penalties. Some equity in my condo, but not much. Her lawyer sent a settlement offer. He continued. "Drop all claims that Jessica stole your work. Issue a public apology. Pay $25,000 in damages. Or face trial. That's extortion. It's legal strategy. They're betting you can't afford to fight." "How long do I have?" 14 days to respond to the lawsuit. I sat on my couch after we hung up, staring at the legal papers. Rock bottom, I thought. This is what rock bottom feels like. But I was wrong. I hadn't hit bottom yet. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. Every scenario ended the same way. Financial ruin, professional destruction, complete defeat. On the 4th night, I gave up on sleep entirely. I opened my laptop and started searching. If I was going down, I at least wanted to understand who had destroyed me. Jessica's LinkedIn profile was polished and professional. Impressive resume, recommendations from previous employers, all the right keywords. But something nagged at me. I clicked through to her employment history. 3 companies in 4 years, each position lasting 12 to 18 months. Not unusual in tech, people moved around. But still, first company, Hartman Marketing Group in Portland. Marketing assistant. 18 months. Left to pursue new opportunities. I typed Hartman Marketing Group Portland restructure into Google. The third result was a local business journal article from 3 years ago. Hartman Marketing Group undergoes restructuring. Marketing director departs. No name given. Just that the director had resigned to spend more time with family. The timing matched exactly with Jessica's departure. Coincidence? Maybe. Second company. Velocity Creative, in San Francisco. Marketing coordinator. 14 months. I searched for news from that time period. Found a post on a professional forum called Marketing Pros. Anonymous user. 3 years ago. Has anyone else dealt with an assistant who takes credit for your work? Happened to me at a SF agency. Built a whole harassment case against me when I called her out. Nearly destroyed my career. Be careful who you trust. No names, but the timeline matched, and the pattern was identical. My heart was racing now. I created a fake LinkedIn profile, generic name, minimal information. I searched for employees who had worked at Hartman Marketing Group during Jessica's time there. Found 5. Sent careful messages to each. I'm researching workplace dynamics in marketing agencies. Would you be willing to share your experience at Hartman? One responded within an hour, Sarah Mitchell. She had been a marketing director at Hartman. We moved to a phone call. Why are you asking about that place? Sarah's voice was cautious. I worked with someone who was there during your time. Jessica Hartley. I'm trying to understand some things that happened at my company. Silence. Then, what did she do to you? I told her everything. The theft, the harassment accusations, the investigation, the termination, the lawsuit. Oh God, Sarah whispered. It's exactly what she did to me. Exactly. Sarah's story spilled out. Jessica had been her assistant. Eager, helpful, trustworthy. Then Sarah noticed ideas disappearing, showing up in other people's presentations. When she confronted Jessica, suddenly there were harassment allegations. Investigations. Sarah was forced to resign before she could be fired. She had signed an NDA as part of her severance, which was why she had never spoken publicly. Did you suspect anyone else was involved? I asked. The CEO, Sarah said. He was weirdly supportive of Jessica throughout. And after I left, I heard through the grapevine that he hired her as a consultant at his next company. Like he was rewarding her. What was the CEO's name? Grant Sullivan. Why? I searched for Grant Sullivan. Found his LinkedIn. He had left Hartman 18 months after Sarah. Moved to a consulting firm called Vertex Solutions. My hands shook as I searched for Vertex Solutions' client list. Buried on their website, in small print, advisory services provided to multiple companies including Velocity Creative. Velocity Creative. Jessica's second company. Sarah. I need to find the marketing director from Velocity Creative. The one Jessica worked under. I might be able to help with that, Sarah said. I'm connected to some people in the San Francisco scene. Let me make some calls. 2 hours later, my phone rang. A man's voice, deep and tired. This is Marcus Chen. Sarah said you wanted to talk about Jessica Hartley. Marcus's story was nearly identical. Assistant, trust, theft, harassment allegations. But Marcus had fought back harder. He hired a lawyer, demanded a fair investigation. Jessica had responded by escalating her claims, adding accusations of sexual harassment. The company panicked. They offered Marcus a settlement, 6 months' salary, if he resigned immediately and signed an NDA. I took it, Marcus said. I had a wife and 2 kids. I couldn't risk a public trial, even though I was innocent. It destroyed me for years. I'm still rebuilding my career. Marcus, was there anyone at Velocity who seemed to support Jessica unusually strongly? The COO. Woman named Diana Wright. She and Jessica seemed close. And after I left, I heard Diana moved to some HR consulting firm. I felt electricity running through me. Do you remember the name? Something corporate. Strategic something. I searched. Found it. Strategic Human Capital Solutions. Boutique HR consulting firm in Seattle. I clicked through to their staff page, and there she was. Diana Wright, senior consultant, and 2 positions below her. Patricia Chen, consultant. Patricia, our HR director, the one who investigated my case. She had worked with Diana Wright, who had helped push Marcus out of Velocity Creative. This wasn't coincidence. This was a network. I called Sarah back. Grant Sullivan, the CEO who helped Jessica at Hartman. Where did he end up after Vertex Solutions? I'm not sure. Let me look. Pause. His LinkedIn says he's on the advisory board for several companies, including your company, Cascade Tech Advertising. My vision blurred. He's on our board? Joined about 8 months ago, looks like. 8 months ago. 2 months before Jessica was hired. I started mapping it out on paper. Grant Sullivan joins Cascade's board. Brings in Patricia Chen as HR director through his consulting network. Jessica gets hired as my assistant. The scheme begins, but I needed to understand why. What did they gain? I pulled up Brandon's profile, our CEO. Searched for his compensation structure. Publicly filed since we had some venture capital investors. His salary was decent, but his bonuses were tied to specific metrics: cost savings and internal talent development. Cost savings, like eliminating an expensive marketing director's salary. Internal talent development, like promoting assistants to director level. If Brandon could show the board that he was cutting costs by replacing senior staff with cheaper, newly promoted employees while maintaining or improving results, his bonuses would be substantial. And if Grant Sullivan was on the board approving those bonuses, both of them benefited. Jessica was the tool. She moved from company to company, stealing work, destroying careers, getting promoted temporarily, then moving on to the next target. The executives got their cost savings and bonuses. Jessica got rapid career advancement and presumably a cut of the profits. Patricia provided the HR cover, ensuring investigations went the right way. It was brilliant, and it was disgusting. I had 6 days left to respond to the lawsuit. 6 days to decide if I would settle, apologize, pay Jessica $25,000, and accept defeat. Or I could fight. If I fought and lost, I would lose everything. My condo, my savings, potentially face bankruptcy. The judgment could follow me for years. But if I won, I could expose the whole scheme, save my reputation, stop them from doing this to anyone else. I thought about Sarah, forced to resign, signing an NDA, silenced. About Marcus, settling to protect his family, carrying the trauma for years. About the other victims I hadn't found yet. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I'm not settling, I said. I'm fighting. And I need you to help me find everyone Jessica has done this to. Wendy, the cost. I don't care about the cost. This is bigger than me. That night, I created a detailed timeline. Every company, every victim, every connection. I reached out to more former employees. Some responded. Others were too scared, too bound by NDAs, too traumatized. But I found 5 people willing to talk. 5 careers destroyed by the same pattern. I compiled everything into a comprehensive document. And then I made a decision that would either save me or finish destroying me. I went to the FBI. The Seattle FBI field office was in a modern building downtown. I had called ahead, been transferred 3 times, finally reached a junior agent who specialized in white-collar crime. Agent Rodriguez met me in a sparse conference room. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. "Miss Harper, you said on the phone you have evidence of corporate fraud?" I spread out my timeline, my documents, my evidence. "I believe there's a coordinated scheme to defraud companies by systematically pushing out senior employees through false harassment claims, replacing them with cheaper labor, and allowing executives to collect bonuses based on the resulting cost savings." Agent Rodriguez listened. He took notes. He asked pointed questions. I. 3 hours later, he sat back. "This is complex. If what you're alleging is true, we're looking at wire fraud, conspiracy, potentially identity theft and forgery. But I need to be honest with you. This is also a he said, she said workplace dispute. Juries don't like those. I have 5 other victims with the same pattern. How many are willing to testify? 2 for certain. Sarah and Marcus. The others are scared of NDA violations. That's not enough for a prosecution. I'd need harder evidence. Financial records showing the bonuses and how they correlate to the schemes. Electronic evidence of the forgeries. Proof of coordination. I can get that." He looked at me carefully. "How?" "I still have contacts inside the company. People who know something's wrong. And Jessica just got promoted to my position. She has access to everything now. If the pattern holds, she'll target someone else soon." Agent Rodriguez drummed his fingers on the table. "You're talking about becoming an informant. That's dangerous. If they find out, the lawsuit against you becomes the least of your problems. They've already destroyed my career. I have nothing left to lose. You could face retaliation, intimidation. And there's no guarantee we can build a case strong enough to prosecute." "I understand." He studied me for a long moment. "Let me talk to my supervisor. If we move forward, you'll need to be careful. Document everything. Don't do anything illegal. No hacking, no stealing, no trespassing. You can only use information you legally obtain or that people willingly give you." 2 days later, Agent Rodriguez called. "We're opening a preliminary investigation. It's not a full case yet, but we're interested. Are you still willing to cooperate?" "Yes." "Then here's what we need." Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I reconnected with former colleagues, carefully feeling out who might be sympathetic. I found 3 people who suspected something was wrong but were too scared to speak up. Joel from media planning was the most helpful. He had access to financial systems. He couldn't directly download information without authorization, but he could point me to public filings and documents that showed the pattern of bonuses. Samantha from Creative knew Patricia and Diana Wright had worked together before. She found their old company website, cached versions showing their overlap. Marcus, my supporter from accounting, was still at the company. He quietly documented Jessica's activities now that she was in my old position. Her late nights in the office, her access to files, the pattern beginning again. I wore a wire to a coffee meeting with Jessica's former roommate, who casually mentioned how Jessica had bragged about playing the game at previous companies. I documented everything meticulously, photographed every piece of evidence, sent encrypted files to Agent Rodriguez. But I was running out of time. The lawsuit deadline was approaching. I had to respond. My lawyer and I crafted a response that denied all allegations but didn't reveal what I was really doing. We filed it, knowing it would trigger the next phase of Jessica's plan. Meanwhile, I learned from Joel that Brandon was pushing for another round of restructuring. Target: the creative director position. Salary: $200,000. Potential replacement cost: $90,000. The pattern was repeating. Then Gerald Finch called me. Gerald was on the board of directors. I had researched him extensively. Retired executive, reputation for integrity, no apparent connection to Grant Sullivan. I had sent him a carefully worded email a week earlier. Important information regarding corporate governance and potential misconduct. Miss Harper, he said when I answered. I got your email. I've been hearing things. Concerns about the investigation into your termination. I'd like to meet. Hope surged through me. When? Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. coffee shop on Pike Street. I called Agent Rodriguez immediately. A board member wants to meet. This could be the break we need. Be careful. Record everything. Don't make accusations you can't prove. That night I barely slept. I organized my presentation, printed documents, prepared to lay out the entire conspiracy. The coffee shop was busy with morning commuters. Gerald arrived exactly on time. A tall man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. We found a quiet corner. Thank you for meeting me, I said. I've been troubled by several things, he said. The speed of your termination. The promotion of someone so inexperienced. Grant Sullivan's unusual interest in HR matters. Talk to me. I laid out everything. The pattern, Jessica's history, the network of conspirators, the financial motive. I showed him the timeline, the connections, the statements from Sarah and Marcus. Gerald listened intently, asking sharp questions, taking notes. When I finished, he sat back. This is serious. If true, it's grounds for immediate investigation by the full board and potential criminal liability. Will you help me? I'll bring this to the board. We'll call an emergency meeting. Can you present this to them? When? 2 days. Friday morning, 9 a.m. Company headquarters. You'll have 30 minutes. I called Agent Rodriguez. It's happening. Board presentation in 2 days. That's fast. Are you ready? I have to be. Those 2 days were a blur of preparation. Sarah and Marcus agreed to join via video call. I refined my presentation, organized evidence, practiced my delivery. Agent Rodriguez briefed me on what to say, what to avoid, how to present facts without speculation. Friday morning arrived. I dressed in my best suit, loaded my presentation, drove to Cascade Tech. For the first time since my termination, Gerald met me in the lobby. He looked nervous. I need to warn you. They know you're coming. Brandon and Grant insisted on being present. Jessica will be there too. My stomach dropped. I thought this was a board meeting. It is. But as CEO and a board member, they have the right to attend. And they insisted Jessica should hear the accusations directly. This was worse than I expected. But I had come too far to back out. The boardroom was on the top floor. 7 board members sat around the table. Brandon at one end, Thomas the lawyer next to him, and Jessica, sitting calm and composed. I set up my laptop with shaking hands. Gerald called the meeting to order. We're here to review allegations of misconduct raised by former employee Wendy Harper. Miss Harper, you have 30 minutes, I began. The pattern, the victims, the network, the financial motive. I showed screenshots, timelines, statements. I played the recording of Jessica's former roommate. The board members looked troubled. They whispered to each other. Several glanced at Brandon, who sat stone-faced. Then I brought up Sarah and Marcus via video call. They told their stories. The same pattern. The same pain. When I finished, the board chair, a woman named Dorothy, spoke. This is deeply concerning. Brandon. Grant. What's your response? Brandon cleared his throat. This is a desperate attempt by a terminated employee to smear the company and avoid responsibility for her own misconduct. The investigation was thorough. The findings were clear, yet the pattern Miss Harper describes is coincidence and speculation. Grant Sullivan interrupted. Jessica has been an exceptional employee at every company. Sometimes people don't work out. That's not evidence of conspiracy. Dorothy turned to Jessica. Miss Hartley, Would you like to respond? Jessica's eyes were red. This is incredibly hurtful. I've worked so hard to build my career. To have someone I respected make these accusations. She wiped her eyes. I understand Wendy is angry about being terminated. But this is fantasy. I started to respond. But Dorothy held up her hand. This clearly requires further investigation. We'll need to review, Thomas interrupted. Before we proceed, there's something the board needs to know. Every head turned to him. The company completed a forensic audit last week, Thomas said, of expense reports and financial transactions. We found irregularities in Miss Harper's department. My blood ran cold. Irregularities? Dorothy asked. Thomas opened a folder. $75,000 in questionable expenses over the past 2 years. Client dinners that no one remembers. Conference travel with discrepancies. Hotel rooms. Purchases coded as business expenses that appear personal in nature. That's impossible, I said. I never submitted fraudulent expenses. He spread documents across the table. Expense reports with my digital signature. Credit card statements. Email approvals. Everything looked official, authentic. Damning. This is forged, I said desperately. Jessica spoke softly. Wendy, I discovered these discrepancies months ago. I tried to talk to you about it. That's when the harassment started. You were trying to silence me. The room tilted. The forgery was perfect. My signature, my email, going back 2 years. They had been planning this for longer than I realized. Dorothy's expression had changed. The sympathy was gone. Miss Harper, this is a serious allegation. It's fabricated. Just like everything else. Brandon leaned forward. We're obligated to report this to authorities. We're considering criminal charges for embezzlement. Gerald looked at me, and I saw the doubt in his eyes. Even he was questioning now. Thomas continued. Given the severity of these findings, I recommend we terminate this meeting and turn all materials over to law enforcement. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The trap had closed perfectly. Security was called. I was escorted out of the building for the second time. Outside, Jessica and Brandon emerged minutes later. Through the glass doors, I saw Jessica smile at me. The smile of someone who had won completely. My phone rang as I sat in my car. A Seattle police detective. Miss Harper? I need you to come in for an interview regarding embezzlement allegations. My lawyer called next. Wendy, what happened? The company's lawyer just called me about criminal charges. They forged evidence, made it look like I stole money. This is bad. Much worse than the civil lawsuit. If they press charges, you could face prison time. That afternoon, the story broke online. Former marketing director accused of embezzlement after harassment claims. My name was public now. Fully exposed. My phone exploded with messages. Former friends, colleagues, even my ex-husband. Did you really steal money? I sat in my apartment as darkness fell, watching my life completely disintegrate. Everything I had worked for, everything I was, destroyed. They had won. The conspiracy was too perfect, too comprehensive. I had one last call to make. Agent Rodriguez, I said when he answered. They set a trap. I walked right into it. I know. I saw the news. But Wendy? What? We got it. Everything we needed. I didn't understand. What do you mean? The board meeting was recorded, right? Standard practice? Yes. And Thomas laid out the fraudulent expenses in detail. Timestamps, methods, everything. He basically confessed to the forgery without realizing it. My heart started pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying the trap they set for you? They just walked into a bigger one. We've been monitoring their communications for the past week. We have Jessica on tape coordinating the forgery. We have Patricia's emails to Diana Wright. We have Brandon's bonus structure showing the financial motive. And now we have them on record, in a board meeting, presenting forged evidence as real. So what happens now? Now? You sit tight. Don't talk to the police without your lawyer. Don't respond to any media. And trust me, tomorrow morning, things are going to change. Let me take you back to that moment in the conference room. The moment I slid the document to Thomas. Because here's what you didn't know. What nobody in that room knew, except Thomas and me. That document wasn't just about Jessica's theft. It was comprehensive. A complete dossier of everything. When I discovered the conspiracy 6 weeks earlier, I didn't just go to Gerald, I went to the FBI first. And Agent Rodriguez did something brilliant. He reached out to Thomas, our corporate lawyer, independently, because Thomas had been noticing things too. Irregularities in HR investigations, patterns in terminations, financial bonuses that didn't quite add up. He was troubled, but had no proof. The FBI brought him in as a cooperating witness. Thomas had been documenting everything from inside, gathering evidence, building the case. That's why, when I slid him that document in the original meeting, his face went white. Not because he was surprised by what I had found, but because it matched exactly what he had been documenting. And it meant the operation was moving forward. Jessica was making her move, and we could finally act. Everything that happened after, the investigation, the termination, the lawsuit, even the embezzlement accusations, Thomas and I were documenting it all. I was wearing a wire to meetings. Every conversation was recorded. Every forged document was captured with full metadata showing the real creation date. The board meeting where I presented the evidence? That wasn't me trying to expose them. That was us giving them enough rope to hang themselves. We needed them to commit to their story publicly, on record, in front of witnesses. When Thomas presented the fraudulent expense reports, he was doing it deliberately. Agent Rodriguez needed them to fully commit to the forgery, to explain their methods, to demonstrate the conspiracy. And they did. Brandon, Jessica, and Patricia had become so confident in their scheme that they didn't hesitate. They presented forged documents as evidence in an official board meeting, which is a federal crime all by itself. The morning after that disastrous board meeting, I woke up to pounding on my door. But it wasn't police coming to arrest me. It was Agent Rodriguez with 4 other agents. We're executing search warrants at Cascade Tech, Brandon's home, Jessica's apartment, and Patricia's office. I wanted to give you a heads up before you see it on the news. 2 hours later, federal agents walked into Cascade Tech advertising. They seized computers, files, phones. Employees were questioned. The office descended into chaos. Brandon was arrested at his home. Wire fraud? Conspiracy to commit fraud? Embezzlement? Because while they were framing me for stealing $75,000, the investigation found that Brandon and Grant had been skimming money through fake consulting contracts for years, millions of dollars. Jessica was arrested at the office. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, forgery, obstruction of justice. She tried to blame Brandon, said he had manipulated her, but the recordings showed she was a willing, enthusiastic participant. Patricia was arrested at her home. Obstruction of justice, conspiracy, fraud. She had been rigging investigations at 4 different companies, all coordinated through Diana Wright's consulting network. Diana Wright was arrested in Portland. Grant Sullivan was arrested at his country club. Derek and the other employees who had given false testimony were brought in for questioning, offered immunity deals in exchange for testimony. They all took the deals. The media coverage was immediate and massive. Major corporate fraud ring broken up by FBI. Tech company executives arrested in elaborate scheme. Marketing director helps expose multi-million-dollar conspiracy. The civil lawsuit Jessica had filed against me was dismissed with prejudice. The judge ordered Jessica to pay all my legal fees plus sanctions for filing a fraudulent suit. The board of Cascade Tech held an emergency meeting. Dorothy, the board chair, called me personally. Miss Harper, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. We failed you. We didn't see what was happening. We allowed this to occur. They offered me my job back, plus a promotion to vice president of marketing, a significant raise, a formal apology published on the company website. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I declined. Why? Dorothy asked. Because I can't work somewhere that let this happen. That ignored warning signs. That chose to believe an elaborate lie over an 8-year employee. I appreciate the apology, but some things can't be fixed by a promotion. Instead, I took the substantial settlement they offered. Enough to cover all my legal fees, replace my lost salary, and fund what came next. I started my own consulting firm, Harper Consulting, specializing in ethical marketing and workplace fraud prevention. My first calls were to Sarah and Marcus. Want to join me? They both said yes. Within 2 months, we had 6 clients. Companies that wanted to ensure they would never fall victim to schemes, like the one that had almost destroyed us. We taught them how to recognize patterns, protect employees, create real accountability. The criminal trial happened 8 months later. I testified for 3 days, laid out everything I had witnessed, everything I had documented, everything I had endured. Jessica's defense tried to paint her as a victim, manipulated by Brandon and Grant. But the recordings showed otherwise. She had been an enthusiastic participant, often suggesting new ways to manipulate victims. Brandon tried to claim he didn't know about the forgeries, but financial records showed he had approved payments to offshore accounts that had funded the operation. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Jessica was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Brandon got 7 years. Patricia got 2 years. Grant Sullivan got 6 years. Diana Wright got 3 years. They all appealed. They all lost. The civil suits came next. Sarah, Marcus, and 8 other victims filed a class action lawsuit against the companies that had enabled the scheme. It settled for $11 million. My life rebuilt slowly. I paid off my legal debts. I bought a house. I hired employees. My company grew. 1 year after that terrible conference room meeting, I sat in my new office and looked at a framed copy of that original document I had slid to Thomas, the one that started everything. I had it matted and hung on my wall as a reminder that documentation matters, that patterns reveal truth, that standing up to injustice, even when it seems hopeless, can make a difference. My phone rang. A new client, a woman whose assistant had been taking credit for her work. She had seen my company's website, read my story, and wanted help. "Tell me everything," I said. She did. And as I listened, I recognized the patterns. Different people, different company, but the same scheme, still out there, still destroying careers. But now there were people who knew how to stop it. I thought about calling Gerald to thank him. He had believed me when it mattered, even though the evidence had looked so damning at the end. He had pushed for that board meeting despite the risks. Without him, the trap might never have sprung. Then I thought about Thomas, the courage it took to work with the FBI while maintaining his cover, to present forged evidence knowing it would make people hate him temporarily, to trust that the truth would eventually come out. And I thought about Agent Rodriguez, who had seen past the he said, she said workplace dispute to the real criminal conspiracy underneath. But mostly, I thought about Jessica, sitting in federal prison, probably still believing she had been smarter than everyone else, right up until the moment the FBI agents read her rights. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about documentation or evidence or legal strategy. It was about patience, about trusting the process, even when everything looked hopeless, about understanding that sometimes the only way to win is to let your opponent think they've already won and wait for them to get careless. Justice took time. It took 8 months of investigation, a trial, appeals. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. There were moments I wanted to give up, to settle, to walk away, but I didn't. And neither did the 11 other victims who came forward. Together, we stopped a conspiracy that had been running for 6 years. We saved careers. We sent criminals to prison. We changed corporate policies at dozens of companies. Was it worth it? Every sleepless night, every dollar spent on lawyers, every moment of public humiliation? Yes. Because some things matter more than comfort, or money, or reputation. Standing up for what's right matters. Protecting others from what happened to you matters. Fighting even when you think you'll lose matters. I answered the new client's questions, took notes on her situation, began formulating a strategy. As we spoke, I glanced at that framed document on my wall, the one that said, in handwritten letters at the top, documentation of theft and conspiracy, notarized and witnessed. Just one document. That's all it took to start unraveling everything. Well, that and courage, and patience, and the absolute refusal to let injustice win. 3 years later, my company has 20 employees. We've helped 47 people expose workplace fraud. We've consulted with 73 companies on ethical practices. We've given presentations at business schools about recognizing and preventing corporate conspiracies. Sarah runs our investigations division. Marcus handles our financial forensics. And me? I tell our story, over and over, to anyone who will listen. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting at their desk, watching their assistant present their work, feeling that twist in their stomach, wondering if they're imagining things, afraid to speak up. I want them to know, you're not imagining it. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And no matter how impossible it seems, fight back. The world needs people who refuse to stay silent when they witness injustice, who stand up even when standing up means risking everything, who believe that truth, given enough time and evidence, will prevail. That's what I learned in that conference room. That's what I carry with me every day. And that's why, when my phone rings with a new client who has been betrayed, I answer with hope instead of cynicism, because I know something Jessica never understood. You can forge documents, manipulate investigations, destroy reputations, but you can't forge courage. You can't manipulate truth. And you can't destroy someone who refuses to stay down. That document I slid to Thomas was more than evidence. It was a declaration. It said, I see you. I know what you're doing. And I will not be silent. Sometimes, one document is all it takes to change everything. Sometimes, one person standing up is all it takes to bring down an empire of lies. And sometimes, the assistant who mocked you ends up in federal prison while you build something better from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. So here's my question for you. Have you ever witnessed workplace injustice and stayed silent because you thought you couldn't make a difference? What would you do if you were in my position? Would you fight or would you walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to give up, and share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right is always worth it, no matter how impossible it seems. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you think, that truth matters, and that justice, though sometimes slow, is worth fighting for. Stay strong, document everything, and never let anyone steal your voice.